my heart is pounding quite a bit when you said that. A lot of you know me, Naren, and Lopa Mudra, we call Lopa. I think my heart is pounding, not just because of nervousness, because I've been in front of you all a lot, and I've been in front of big groups of people before. I'm overwhelmed and excited. My soul is trembling because of what all this is. It's really hard to put into words, but and what all is converging in this moment. But it starts, at least this collection, starts in 1893. January 5th, Calcutta, India. Well, actually, a little north, Gorakhpur. A young boy is born, Mukunda Lal Ghosh, and his family knew that there was something special about him, but they didn't quite know what was coming in his life. But we know now who he was. He later became Swami Yogananda, and then Paramahansa Yogananda. January 5th, 1893. Then, September 1st, 1893, in a little town, farming town, outside of Fort Wayne, Ohio, a little boy is born, J. Oliver Black. 10 days later, September 11th, 1893, in Chicago, the first World Parliament of Religions, where Swami Vivekananda spoke. He only gave 3 speeches, but they're known as the most famous speeches of the World Parliament of Religions, including his opening statement, Sisters and Brothers of America, which was followed by a minute of standing applause. Then in 1920, when J. Oliver Black moved to Detroit, Swami Yogananda leaves India and arrives in Boston. He didn't know if he was going to stay for very long. He told his father and his own guru, "I'll be back in a few years, at most, unless the Americans really want me." And they did, because it took him 15 years before he got home. 1932, so 12 years go by. Swami Yogananda is touring across the country. And during those years, we know that Mr. Black began his spiritual quest. And how does a man growing up in the Midwest in the early 1900s find the gems of India? He, of course, had the Bible. He had access to holy books. But somehow there was a call in his soul for something from India that so many of us have had. And you think, how in the heck am I going to figure this out? This collection shows, for example, a Bhagavad Gita in his personal collection that's published in 1887, before he was born. In those days, there were only 6 translations of the Bhagavad Gita in English. And now there's an estimated 600. Translated by Mohini Chatterjee, which is a very Bengali name. Bengali just like Yogananda, just like Lopa. Bhagavad Gita, or the Lord's Lay. commentary and notes, as well as references to the Christian scriptures. 1887. Patanjali Yoga Aphorisms, or as we know now, the Yoga Sutras, in his collection. 1890 is when it was published. An interpretation by William Q. Judge, assisted by James Henderson Conley. I think they lacked perhaps the knowledge of having been born in India and knowing what the teachings were, but they made a valiant effort. But I do want to give an example of what Mr. Black was faced with trying to find the pearls of wisdom from India. From Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Book 2, Verse 1. The practical art of concentration is mortification, muttering, and resignation to the Supreme Soul. We don't know what muttering was supposed to be. Or mortification.
He does mutter.
He mutters. It does clarify a little bit here that the muttering is a semi-audible repetition of formula. So perhaps Mr. Black was not satisfied with that particular version, and he came across another one, perhaps better chance. 1930 by the Theosophical Library, this time translated by a professor of Sanskrit, M.N. Dwivedi. The spelling of Sanskrit is with an M. That's Sam-script. Thinking of Sam Gabby. Sam-script. An original 1916 printing of Rabindranath Tagore's Songs of Kabir. This one really impressed me. The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, which was first presented in 1942. So Yogacharya, Mr. Black, I want to continue along the story. Mr. Black, I'll get to that. I was out of order, skipping ahead. Let's see. (1928) by W.I. Evans Wentz, original, Tibet's great yogi, Milarepa. The story of Milarepa and Marpa. As we know, W.I. Evans Wentz wrote the introduction to the Whispers from Eternity and the autobiography in the beginning, which was in 1935. So Mr. Black moves to Detroit in 1920 with his wife, Ethel. And at the time when Swami Yogananda arrives in Boston, the 12 years of Mr. Black's life, many of you know better than I do. I don't know yet his biography. But in those 12 years, not only creating a business, the inner man and the search for truth, the search for realization, the search for these gems of the East, of yoga. And I did read a quote of Mr. Black saying that any time someone came through Detroit or even Chicago who was speaking about the wisdom of India, he would go. And he said so many times he started to hear a similar message over and over again about the overall instruction of that quest in terms of how Indians will see it. He said, but no one told me how. And in the quote it said, and I'm an American and I'm not very patient. I was touched by that. So in 1932, again, I've heard different stories, and I don't think the details matter at this point, but the way in which he met Swami Yogananda. Again, he heard that a great soul from India is going to be passing through Detroit, and he made efforts, of course, to go meet with him. And despite some of the differences in the stories, what is common is that instant recognition, not only of the master seeing one, saying, you've come, because as we know, he said, in visions he saw the faces of many of the people that he was to meet in America. And surely he saw the face of that young man from Ohio, J. Oliver Black. So when he saw him walk into a room in Detroit after 12 years of traveling through the United States and seeing someone that he recognized, friends once more to be, as Yoganandaji said. Quite a dramatic moment. And so in this library, not only is there a glimpse of this journey of search, the quest. One of the books here, a very important book by Swami Ramdas, who people call now Papa Ramdas, from 1946. He was a yogi, greatly respected yogi. And he wrote a very simple book called In the Quest of God. And again, 1946, these old treasures. In the quest of God. That is so much of what Yogacharya's library reflects. And this is just a part of it, a very special part of it. There's more books we saw. Not just a dive into what the East offers, but a dive into true Christianity, searching through. I don't know, again, much of what Mr. Black said about that search, but I do know what James J. Lynn said, who was later Rajasi. He was from Missouri and was about the same age. And he said in a recording, I grew up hearing the verses of the Bible. And he says, and I couldn't make any sense out of it. But I knew there must have been something, but I couldn't grasp it. And so I wonder if in a similar way, Mr. Black was diving into, and you see in some of the collections, and he had very old Bibles in his collections. And he came across a friend, they became friends, George Lamsa, who many scholars recognize as a very important man in the research of the Bible, because he released the Lamsa Bible, which presented the Bible in Aramaic, in the specific dialect of the region that he was from. And so we saw in this, one of his books, More Light on the Gospel by George M. Lamsa, and inside, from 1968, inscribed, to my dear friend Oliver, with the blessings of Jesus Christ, for a happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year. Signs George Lamsa. So the friendships that he developed in his spiritual life, I'm sure in his social life, in his family life, we know so much of his involvement with Detroit and Michigan and so many things. But I'm overwhelmed by this quest of God by this man named J. Oliver Black, and the parallels and the synchronicity of his life with the life of Swami Yogananda. Before we revisit some of these books to talk about more of these special books and his relationship with Yogananda, I would like to introduce Lopa Mudra again, and she's going to share a little bit of some of the special books that she recognized right away.
First of all, heartfelt gratitude to Carol for letting me even touch these books. They are so precious and so full of insight. Last year was the first time I was fortunate enough to be invited to come and spend time at Song of the Morning. And I knew right away what a special place this is and what a privilege it is to be here for an extended period of time and feel the holy nature of this land. And as I stayed here longer, I heard many stories from many of you who had the good fortune to meet the Yogacharya Ji while he was still in the body. But I was always curious that what was he really like, and what is it like to be born in the Midwest and have such a deep desire to know the East. And this library, it was great that as soon as I got here, within the first week, I had access to these books. And most of my time this summer has been, kind of being like a kid in a candy store looking at these books. It's because through a person's personal book collection, you know so much of their nature. And these are not just books, there are so many handwritten notes here in little envelopes or just a notepad, and it's so pristinely preserved, which we'll get to in preservation. But just wanted to tell you that while I was looking through those books, I saw this book. And right here is Bengali. It says Oti Sundar Bharat, meaning the beautiful India. And to see my mother tongue in a beautiful old leather-bound book in the North Woods of Michigan was more than a surprise. And inside it, I saw this was published before India was India as we know it. This was India when it was still a British colony. And so the territory includes Ceylon, which is Sri Lanka now, and Burma and Nepal. So that was all a part of the British colony. And when I spoke to my mother about this, she just was beside herself with joy. She said that she had no idea. She knew that I was at a yoga center in Michigan, but she had no idea the depth of the connection with the Bengali culture here. Because Paramahansa Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar before him and Lahiri Mahashaya all come from that land and all speak that language. And also Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda, they all did. So the language is very dear to my heart. And to see a book like this, and inside this book, there's pictures of my favorite poet, Rabindranath Tagore, with his disciples sitting around. And every picture, here it is, Rabindranath Tagore with his Eastern and Western disciples. And here is his art school where all the women are sitting around and painting. And each picture has a description in English and Bengali and Urdu. All the major languages that were prevalent in that time period in India. So this is a real peek into history. I never thought I could really handle a book like this other than the National Library in Kolkata. So, and to find it here is more than words can express. Made me feel so much more at home and gave me some insight into why was I brought here. I never ever thought I'd come here. My whole life was in and around Encinitas after I came to America. But now I know why I was here. This is eye-opening for me. And this kind of gave me other books too here. Here is the other book. This is one of the original copies of Rabindranath Tagore's Gitanjali, for which he was awarded the Nobel Prize. And to see it in the Yogacharya's collection, it's amazing to me. And it's very kind of touching that when I came here last year, I saw this beautiful river going by here. It's such a happy river. And I told Naren that it should have a different name. And then we kept thinking, what's the name? And then we started calling the river Gitanjali because it means song offering. And this is Song of the Morning Ranch. So that's our little love name for the river that we, all of us young people like Justine and all, we all call it Gitanjali. And to have this book in Yogacharya's collection it just tickled me. And then of course then he has the Gospel of Ramakrishna, Life of Vivekananda, and as Naren said, the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, all of that, which kind of gives me an insight about the cultural side of him too, that how expansive his mindset was. It wasn't at all closed-minded. And as I meet so many of you in Song of the Morning, I often feel that expansiveness has passed down to his close ones. Like last night, Ian reading from Rumi, or Sandy quoting from the Gospel of Ramakrishna. It's just it's so Bengali. We relish in sitting around and reading philosophy amongst each other. It felt like an old Bengali household where all of us cousins sit together and read favorite quotes to each other. That all embracing quest for God is so prevalent in Song of the Morning. It's not at all myopic. And that's what makes me so happy to be here, is everyone here has this culture of learning and reading. I just love it. And thank you for including me in this group of souls. And thank you again for letting me even touch these books. So we'll continue.
So some of the books along his journey, for example, meeting Rishi Singh Girwal. There's some here that you'll see. Probably, so in 1932, I know that this book wasn't published. So in 1932, is after this meeting, what, aside from the spiritual bond between Swami Yogananda and Mr. Black, what did Mr. Black have as far as books from Yogananda? Yogananda didn't have many books in 1932. There was metaphysical meditations, scientific healing affirmations. This isn't an original, but it's an older one. Metaphysical meditations, scientific healing affirmations, songs of the soul, whispers from eternity. And this is a very old one in Yogacharya's collection from 1935. And it first came out in 1929, but it's 1935. And I thought, well, if Yogacharya had this book, and certainly he had met the great master and had that communion with him and understood that the way that at that time, this Swami from India, the way he spoke about Christ was probably unheard of at that time. And so this union that was manifested in his own search, where he's delving into both Christianity and into the East, and here comes a master from the India speaking so much about Christ. I thought, well, what if, because it sure seems like Yogacharya marked up these books quite a bit, and let's say that he wanted to know a little bit more about, well, how how is he running things? What's the organization look like? In 1932, it was still really largely based in California. But I looked in this old Whispers from Eternity, 1935, so this probably Yogacharya got. And when you open up to the back, there's the address of how to reach Swami Yogananda. Again, he's still Swami Yogananda. He was given the title Paramahansa in 1936. So that's why I'm saying Swami Yogananda, to keep that sense of history. And J. Oliver Black, they meet. So it says here, self-realization, and in parentheses, Yogoda Satsanga. That's what he named his organization, Yogoda Satsanga. It changed in 1936. And it's so beautiful, and I thought how this must have touched Mr. Black's heart and mind when he saw this. Self-realization asks no one whether he is Christian, Jew, Hindu, or Muslim. It only calls all followers of all faiths to travel, hand-clasped in fellowship, the one highway of scientific realization, the short route to God, where all theological bypaths conjoin. Self-realization fellowship is not a denomination. It is all-inclusive and ever ready to welcome old, new, and to-be-discovered truths. It encourages and invites constructive exchange of human experiences, at the same time, without limitation, trying to seek more knowledge of the technique of self-realization in the universal art of living. The instructions of Yogoda definitely point out and teaches the application of the universal technique of self-realization hidden behind the bowers of belief. So what a mission statement that he must have saw. And so there were trips that Mr. Black would take to visit Yogananda, and then he met James J. Lin, who was based down in Kansas City, Missouri, and others. One of the really special books that is here, and I'll just make a side note that we will have time for everyone to come forward and look, but you can't touch, because these are so special and so precious to be preserved that the oils, the natural oils on the fingers, even if you wash your hands, let alone French fries and veggie burgers. But we know that when Yogananda went to India, 1935 and 1936, he went with Richard Wright. When he came, what we know from the inside is everyone was wondering, is he going to come back? If you could imagine what that would feel like if you had Swami Yogananda was with you, your master was with you. And when he goes to India, the likelihood of him not coming back. So he went, but he corresponded a lot with everyone. But while he was there, as he said, he was called by his master. His own master passed away. And it was a very difficult time for him. But through those travels, he was planning to come back. But there was a few moments there where he wasn't going to come back. But he came back 1936, and I'm sure to much joy to everyone. I'm sure Mr. Black was very happy that he came back. While he was there, he had a Ford. They took the Ford out, and in the Autobiography Yogi it says, "We took the pride of Detroit into the remote jungles of West Bengal." So that has more meaning to us now that we're that we're here. But a lot of the stories that were told were just told by Yogananda, like about the Tiger Swami, or he talked about Babaji, but no one saw a picture of Babaji. No one really knew that this book was going to come until 1945. It was published in 46, the copies have come, and there's those beautiful pictures of Paramahansa Yogananda holding the book for that first time, the first printing in Los Angeles. And it's around Christmas time, 1945, and he's getting ready to release them and send them in 46 with stories that have never been told before, pictures that no one has ever seen. And so here's one of them. And it's just so overwhelming to me to imagine the pride and the divine blessing that the Master felt holding this, even this book. And knowing that, as he said, this would be his ambassador throughout the world. Opening it up, taking out a blue pen, and writing to Mr. and Mrs. Oliver Black, with unceasing blessings, Paramahansa Yogananda, December 9th, 1945, LA. Then I don't know how it happened, none of us will know, but the ink color changes to black. Maybe he needed another pen. Maybe later on, he said, give me that, I want to write something more for my dear disciple, Oliver. So in black ink, he writes, may the message of this book be the divine spark to ignite the incense of your lives, ever faithful to self-realization, and spread their fragrance to his throne of omnipresence felt through Kriya Yoga. That's definitely Yoganandaji's handwriting, no doubt. And in this book, and I've become quite familiar with how he liked to mark books. He had a very peculiar way of 2 lines with a pencil at the side of things. Very, very minimal. And it's just the markings to see what Yogacharya was moved by. Kriya Yoga, so many descriptions of Kriya Yoga and the different saints. He really dove into this book, you can see. Another treasure. So this is the 2nd edition of the Autobiography of a Yogi. This was the last edition that came out in Paramahansa Yogananda's lifetime, and it's 1948. And again, it's a Christmas gift. To Oliver and Mrs. Black, with all my love and blessing, this 2nd edition is sent. Very sincerely yours, Paramahansa Yogananda. Then a further note. May the infinite reign in your heart, and may you establish him in true hearts through self-realization. And the initials PY, Paramahansa Yogananda, and writes the address. Mount Washington, 3880, San Rafael, Los Angeles, December 26th, 1938. And there's some new changes, some new additions in this book, including in the back, which I started to notice that Yogacharya loved to just make notes all over the books. In the back, page 264, point between eyebrows. And if you go to 264, there's something there. 162, single eye. 334, Lahiri, Kriya. 335, Lahiri, medicine. 331, red Bible, divine voice. Things like this. This is how he took his notes. In this 2nd edition, there's also, just as in the 1st edition, an emphasis or a mention of World Brotherhood colonies. And the end of this book, of course, is a little bit different because another chapter was written by Yogananda that was published later. So the ending is a little different, but it's one of the last sentences in the entire book. Yogananda writes, far into the night, my dear friend, the first Kriya Yogi in America, Dr. Lewis, discussed with me the need for world colonies founded on a spiritual basis. And those are underlined.
Mm.
This Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna really stunned me. This was published in 1942, before the autobiography of a yogi. We know that Paramahansa Yogananda spoke a lot about Sri Ramakrishna, was born at the time when Sri Ramakrishna's tremendous influence, tremendous presence in Kolkata. And I can speak freely. I did ask a lot of questions about why Sri Ramakrishna was not emphasized so much. It was actually because in Hollywood there was 2 ashrams being started in the 1940s by disciples of Swami Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna. And they asked Paramahansa Yogananda not to talk too much about Sri Ramakrishna. They said, that's our mission, not yours. It's okay, but we know from other sources how sometimes to his direct disciples, Yoganandaji would refer a lot to Sri Ramakrishna. And so this book was quite a treasure in English, because to go from Bengali to English is not easy. And so when this came out in 1942, I would say in modern terms that Yogacharya Black devoured this book. I've never seen such extensive notes, and they were all just stuck into the book. We've set some of them out. It seemed as though any piece of paper that was within reach of Mr. Black, backs of old calendars, envelopes. It looks like he was invited to a millionaire's party by the Detroit Golf Club on December 12th, 1942. But I guess he just said, well, great, yeah, I need that for something. And on the back, 161, eating mangoes, God vision. 162, anger, and it's hard to read some. I'm getting better at his handwriting. 165, awake. 166, strong renunciation. 168, regarding Maya is nothing but the egotism of the embodied soul. I mean, it's constant. It goes, if you just look at the page numbers, 133, 135, 137, 138, 139, 140, through the entire book, 800 pages. On the back of a postcard, an envelope. Sometimes it's as if he's so engrossed he doesn't want to take the time to find another piece of paper. Look at this little tiny one. So immersed, it's as if this speaks to me not of someone who's a scholar. This speaks to me of someone's quest for God, who's almost in an ecstatic state of God communion, who just wants to get it all in and doesn't have the time to even think about the physical world that much, just barely being able to write some notes. I've never seen anything like this. So some of the notes are out. And I was told by some of the ones who were here in Yogacharya's time that he really urged them to read this book. I wanted to just share, and I'm aware of my 5 minutes that I have. I'm going to squeeze it in. And I might go over, but I know that I have your attention. There are some of them where I didn't take these out because it seemed like he wanted to mark a page. So they're left there. And yeah, that one I put because he also did the little dog ear thing where you fold the page up. And he marked this part with one of his little markings, like a little pencil mark. This is Sri Ramakrishna talking. Some attain knowledge of God in the world. Mention is made of 2 classes of yogis, the hidden and the known. Those who have renounced the world are known yogis. Everyone recognizes them. He's referring to those who don the cloth or to have outward sign of renunciation, those yogis. The hidden and the known, those who have renounced the world are known yogis, all recognize them. But the hidden yogis live in the world. They are not known. They are like the maidservant who performs her duties in the house, but whose mind is fixed on her own children in the countryside. He marked that, and we know that he was a hidden yogi. Not to all of you, but in this context, he was hidden. You look at his picture, and when he's roaming around Detroit, no one said, "Oh, look, there's a yogi." Like so many of you. And that's the example. He highlighted many of the devotional songs, particularly this one. Sweet is thy name, O refuge of the humble. It falls like sweet nectar on our ears and comforts us, beloved of our souls. The priceless treasure of thy name alone is the abode of immortality. And he who chants thy name becomes immortal. Falling upon our ears, thy holy name instantly slays the anguish of our hearts. O soul of our souls, fill our hearts with bliss. A tiny little book, Thoughts of Power, Swami Vivekananda. The only mark in it of Yogacharya, he really marked it with his pencil several times. And I love this. The little I know, I'm getting to know Yogacharya a little bit more, but that he marked this out of the whole book. Take up one idea. Make that one idea your life. Think of it. Dream of it. Live on that idea. Let the brain, muscles, nerves, every part of your body be full of that idea, and just leave every other idea alone. This is the way to success, and this is the way great spiritual giants are produced. He acquired a much smaller version of the Gospel of Ramakrishna by Christopher Isherwood. It also has a lot of his marks in it. And his ongoing friendships. Swami Premananda, who was a contemporary of him, was also a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, and he started the first self-realization center in Washington, D.C. So they obviously maintained a very nice friendship. And after Paramahansa Yogananda left his body, Swami Premananda separated from SRF but kept his church going. So this is a book by Swami Premananda, Prayers of Self-Realization, published in 1945, and it says, to J. Oliver Black, prayer unites soul with God. So you see the nice friendships. Some dear friend of his gave him an old copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, but I can't read the inscription. As he continued his relationship with, oh, this is a treasure. I'm sorry, I know I have 1 minute left. I need to buy some time here. I will renounce my piece of cake. In
No, not that!
No, just my piece. That's my payment. So this one is quite a treasure. It's just a little booklet of the holy science. But here's what makes it so special, is that this is what Yogananda gave him. So it's an old booklet of the holy science. To Oliver, with unceasing blessings, very sincerely, Paramahansa Yogananda, January 15, 1950, Encinitas, California. A little booklet. And very much marked up as well, Yogacharya. And later he acquired, which isn't marked up, but he must have acquired this from someone in India. It's a 1920 holy science, published in India by And this is what Sri Yukteswar was called in India. Sadhu Sabhapati Srimat Swami Sri Yukteswar Giriji Maharaj. So, titles of respect, and also naming him as president of the society. And I saw this bookmark in there and I thought, oh, that's a neat bookmark. It's an older bookmark. And then sure enough, there's writing on it for this book, and it says, page 41, selecting food.
How about selecting cake?
Yeah, I won't read it. But as you well know, Yogacharya took so much of this so seriously, and how much of this knowledge he passed on to so many of you. But you look, and there it is. In page 41, you go right to page 41, and it's Sri Yukteswar's arguments in favor of vegetarianism, written in 1895, in a very, very scientific way. Page 43, conclusion. His concluding remarks about diet. Page 46, company. And if it's just to imagine, again, J. Oliver Black, Yogacharya, finding these things out for the first time in these books, and talking about natural company, that how important it is to be in holy company. And that motivated so much his desire to create this place. Page 49, pranayama. Page 51, asana, which is posture. Page 40.
It's funny that he writes asana because that's how we pronounce. We never emphasize the A on the end.
Yeah. Page 40, animal man, description about something. Anyway, it's just really, he dove into the book and really...
Is that a first edition?
Probably the first English edition, which he probably was given sometime later, not from Yogananda, but it does say here, 1920. So the first editions were in Bengali.
Wow.
And he also had very impressive collection of all of the old magazines, starting from 1926, all of Yogananda's old magazines that looked like this, the East-West magazines, which have many, many unpublished talks that are not published otherwise in here. So they're really, including this isn't the very first one, that might be somewhere else, but it looked like this, East-West. This is 1926. And so Yogacharya, recognizing the value of these, got all of them in a mint condition, had them bound, and inscribed his name, J. Oliver Black, for his private collection. He continued his relationship with SRF over the years, even after Master's passing. So you have like an old book from India about Lahiri Mahashaya, Yogi Raj, Sri Sri Lahiri Mahashaya, and inside it says, "To dear Yogacharya Oliver in divine friendship, Dayamata." Because he met Master at the same time that she did. They considered one another to be spiritual brother and spiritual sister, not mother and son. And so you see it in the language. To dear Yogacharya Oliver, divine friendship, Dayamata. Whispers from Eternity, a newer version came out in 1958. To Yogacharya Oliver, with love in God and Guru, Tara. This was Tara Mata, one of the main editors of SRF. When this book came out in the 80s, to dear Yogacharya Oliver, divine friendship in our blessed Guru, Dayamata. So they're just sharing with him the new books that came out. This one in particular, when God Alone came out, it was a special book. And to dear Yogacharya Oliver, as her life was a divine inspiration to all who knew her, may Gyanamata's biography bring to mind anew the happy days when she and Gurudeva moved among us in the Hermitage in Encinitas. Divine friendship and love, Dayamata, 1984.